And there's no like original Takis. Takis, burst forth from the head of Zeus, covered in blue, you know, synthetic pepper.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs, track by track. I am J. William Hall.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our second season, this one, we've picked none other than pioneering indie rockers, American Music Club. J. William Hall, welcome back. Welcome back. We are here for our second week of deep exploration of Mark Eitzel's studio solo debut, 60 Watt Silver Lining. How are you feeling?
Confidence is high.
Yeah. Confidence in your ability to dive into this side B, or just confidence in general?
Strictly to dive into side B. Other than that, my confidence is shot.
Okay. All right. Well, then why don't we're going to keep it to your, particular area of expertise then.
Yeah, let's focus on side B. Yeah, that's where
Okay.
I'm going to perform at my best, I think, right now.
All right. Excellent. So, with that, why don't we just dig right in? Track 1 on side B, Mission Rock Resort, 4 minutes and 34 seconds. Let's give it a listen.
Let's have a drink at the Mission Rock. Watch the Oakland lights across the dry dock. Watch the blue sky darken like an inhalation over the graveyard of ships and your conversation.
Ah, wow. Jay William.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to dig into these lyrics, but I want to paint a little bit of a picture. There is an actual bar in San Francisco called Mission Rock Resort, or at least there was. And I've been there more than once over the years. Lovely spot. There are actually a few bars in an area that, gosh, it's been many years since I've been there. I would imagine it's probably totally gentrified and everything now, but there was a spot kind of near an area of San Francisco called the Dog Patch that I think is just called Mission Rock. I'm not certain about that, but I think it's called Mission Rock, and it's this little spot on the San Francisco Bay side of the San Francisco Peninsula, toward the south end of the peninsula. Very, very close to where the Giants Stadium is now. At the time, it was kind of a new stadium when I was living there, and it was under construction when I was living there, I think. But this little area was kind of a rundown, kind of industrial wharf area mostly, and the Mission Rock was kind of right there, right on the water, so you could sit out at the Mission Rock, have a drink, and you really did get a very beautiful view across the bay towards Oakland. There's a lot of like dry docks and not shipbuilding, I don't think, but repair and stuff like that.
I have two comments. One is,
Yeah.
I'm picturing in my head the cover of the American Music Club Rise EP, but with like a bar, like patio area.
Yeah, that it may well be that. It may well, it's entirely possible it was kind of shot off that direction.
So my second question is this like a resort? Is there a resort there, or there was a resort at one time, or is it like...
No. Well, I mean, certainly may have been a resort, and I have to be honest with you, I don't remember the bar, at least the bar that I went to, which certainly would have been, 10 years-ish, 5-10 years after Eitzel wrote this song, presumably. I don't remember. There was a place called the Mission Rock. It might have been called the Mission Rock Resort. I don't remember resort as being part of the name, but it's entirely possible. I just remember it being called the Mission Rock. And gosh, I wish I could remember the name of this little bar next door, which I actually preferred. It was even dumpier. But yeah. Anyway, it was it had a
So
feel of kind of like a 1960s rundown bar on the water that served food. I don't know how to describe that. It was in a lot of ways, it didn't have a lot that was very iconic about it, other than it
mhm.
was just one of these like, waterfront bar type places.
Is it more of a touristy place now?
It was not in the era. It certainly was not in the era when I last went there. And I cannot imagine it was when Eitzel was going there, because really that whole part of San Francisco, kind of Mission Rock and Dogpatch, was, my recollection is that that didn't start to really kind of gentrify at all until the, you know,
Was
2000,
was it because of the
2010 kind of thing.
was it because of the stadium? Like, did the stadium then bring all this development and stuff around it, and it became
I
all?
The stadium definitely brought with it a ton of development, and there were some big office buildings that were built right there, kind of in Mission Rock, and some condo building. I don't. I just remember it happened. I had giant season tickets for a number of years in there, and we would park kind of by this bar, and I remember each subsequent season there would be more stuff, and parking would be more regulated, and it was just getting more and more gentrified. By now, God, I would imagine that whole area is totally built up. And I could be crazy, but did they build a new stadium for the basketball team in San Francisco?
I think they did, the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, the Golden State Warriors. I might be nuts, but I think that it might have been built in this area.
That's what the
Which
cities like to do now. Put all the stadiums
which
in the same area.
yeah, which would have, I mean, I can't even imagine what that would have done to this area. But that didn't exist the last time I was there, certainly.
Um,
Anyway, so we're
well,
reminiscing, but I wanted to paint a bit of a picture. This is a
no,
real
no, no.
place.
This is good because one of the things that I found today, I was looking around and I found some performances that Eitzel did of this song,
Yeah.
kind of solo, like on solo tours or something. And before one of them, he gives kind of a long story about
Oh, really?
sort of talking about what the song is about or whatever. And he kind of he said that Mission Rock, something about like, I used to go there before it became like a dance club or something like that, or
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you know.
It might have been. It might have been. It
Oh, and he
might have
said,
been.
and
I
all the
don't.
mean people started coming there. That's what he
Oh,
said.
yeah. Huh. Yeah. I don't know. I just remember the Mission Rock was like, the first time I went, it was there, and it was like you could go and get a drink there, but it was not the bar that I imagined in my mind because I knew this song before I ever went to that bar.
Okay, yeah.
And but there was another bar that was, my recollection is it was a little bit south of where the Mission Rock was, but not very far south. And it actually was exactly what I imagined in my head from the song, but it was a different bar. But
Well, you
so
can imagine that that's where Mark Eitzel was, but maybe the name of that bar didn't work with the song.
yeah. Now, so did he say anything else about the song?
Well, I mean, he sort of laid out a little bit, or he sketched out a little bit of like, he was there with, he didn't say who the woman was, but that she was worried because she had just used a needle at a party and didn't know it wasn't her needle, and she was worried she was going to get AIDS.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, come on, man, like, just he thought that he was mad because he was like, you used a needle. Like, why did you,
Yeah. Yeah.
the fact that it's dirty or whatever is beside the point. Like, I'm upset just that you are still, doing, this drug or whatever. And so he sort of said that, but he did not say who the person was. And then he made a funny comment about, he was like, anyway, like as he got into that story, it got really heavy in the room.
Yeah.
And then he was like, anyway, and everybody laughed. And then he was like, I wrote this heartwarming song about it, and I think you're gonna think it's about your own mother. So,
That's funny.
You should find that clip. It's a good one.
I'll check it out. I have a bit of factual geographic data
You've done some research.
I did just do some research. The bar that I'm referring to, in case you happen to be in this area, apparently still exists, according to Google Maps, and it's called the Ramp. And it is just like, half a block, if that, from the Mission Rock Resort, which is still there. Both are more or less located on beautiful Terry A. Francois Boulevard.
Ooh la la.
Terry A. Francois Boulevard, Illinois Street, and Mariposa Street, kind of right off the Mariposa exit. Anyway, I'm sure.
Well, I will say this: the Ramp would not have worked as a title for this song.
Let's have a drink at the Ramp restaurant. I don't know. It wouldn't sound as cool.
No.
Okay. Well, I also, number 2, I got a hot tip, an anonymous tip.
Whoa.
Don't know whether there's credibility. Don't know if there's credibility, but that this song is in fact written about Kathleen. So the counterparty here is Kathleen.
That was my assumption.
Is what I've been told. Yeah. I didn't actually have that assumption prior to hearing that tip. I really kind of took it on face value that he stopped writing songs about Kathleen. I guess that only lasted for a couple of records because he, wrote I Broke My Promise about Kathleen, apparently wrote this one about her. In any case, digging into the lyrics here, I love these lyrics. I love that they are it's such a portrait of a moment in time, a feeling, and of a place. I do think that the relationship that he describes between, apparently Kathleen, whatever the counterparty is here, is interesting. The dynamic is interesting that he describes later in the lyrics. But up front, what grabs me about these lyrics is just how strong a picture he's painting. And I just love that. I'm a sucker for that, I think, in many songs, and this is definitely one of them.
Yeah, this is definitely like a story song, as opposed to many songs that he writes that are more impressionistic or, we've said a lot like about, this is opaque and I can't quite figure out what he's singing about in the verses. But this one is pretty clear. He paints the whole picture. And the reason that, I assumed or thought that this must be about Kathleen, there's a lot of bitterness. Like, I mean, he sort of says like, I don't love you like that anymore. And, and his reaction to her, telling him about the needle, like, it's a very like, just, bitter reaction from someone who's had a long history with this person. And, it's not, I would think many people would be like, oh, let's get you help, or, there'd be concern or something, but he seems like defeated, cause he's kind of been through it with this,
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a beautiful, maybe calling it beautiful is not the right way to describe it, but there is something lovely about the love that's expressed here, but this resignation. I really feel like this is a resigned song more than anything else. And I've got to say there's a few lines that I want to kind of point out, but to your point, and if we do accept that this song is in fact about Kathleen, pretty prescient, really, sadly, right? Hey, how's your one of the lyrics here? Hey, how's your margarita? You won't be around very much longer, and our talk is useless. I mean, and it turns out, unfortunately, that just a couple years later, she does in fact die, which is a real tragedy. Um, but I don't know. Very, uh, if it is about that, it's a difficult song.
Yeah, I
But
mean, well, even if it's not specifically about her, it's about somebody else or whatever, like this may be the most devastating set of lyrics that Eitzel has written. You know, like
oh, you think
top,
so?
yeah, top three anyway.
Really, really?
I think so. You know, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just this is a very bleak, extremely sad kind of song. And tragic and all of the heavy feelings.
I think I mean so many sections in here that are kind of quotable and worth calling out. But if I could talk it out of you, I would. If I would beat it out of you, I would. But all I can do is follow stupidly behind as you walk and watch you walk into the ocean in your mind, um, which is just phew, crazy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
Tough.
heavy. I mean, that's dark.
Yeah, well, beautiful lyrics, very dark, undeniably dark. But I have to say. Yeah, I love these lyrics. I think these are, contenders for the best lyrics on this album, certainly, and pretty notable, I think, across the catalog. But what about the music? Should we talk about that? Because I do think it's
Yes,
kind of this is an interesting one.
yes. So the thing that the revelation that I had earlier today, as I was clicking around on YouTube, and I found two different performances that Eitzel has done of this song, and 2009, something like that. And in the one, it's just him and a piano player. And in the other
Yeah,
one, it's him, a piano player, and like a little horn section.
yeah,
And I prefer those performances to the one that's on the album.
really.
Yes. I feel like, this one definitely has the slowcore legacy to it. Like, it's got a
Yeah,
slowcore jazz kind of feel. I mean, obviously the Mark Isham man with a muted
yeah,
trumpet at the beginning, like it sets this kind of smoky jazz bar kind of feel to it.
yeah.
But this one somehow it feels a little listless or something to me, like especially compared to the live versions, where I mean, when he's performing live, like the focus is so much on the vocal and you know the piano in that version, it's sparser, and the vocal kind of carries the whole thing, and I like the arc of it. This one feels a little too kind of samey to me, I guess,
Hmm.
musically, like
Hmm.
throughout, like, and it could be down to, we talked about like the drums,
Yeah.
on some of the songs on this album just feel almost like they're just laying down a beat, and they're not changing too much. I don't know. This is my honest assessment.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. We are seeing things differently on this album
Mm.
across a number of the tracks. I love
Controversy.
I love it. I love this performance. This is one of my favorites off the album. I actually think this is one where the drums I like them, and I do feel like there are some actually really nice little drum moments in there. There's God, there's a little. I hesitate to use the term lick ever, but there's a little drum lick in this one that I can hear in my head right now that I've always really liked. Very small little thing, but I think it's nice.
All right.
But
Well,
mostly,
oh,
go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, I
Go
would
ahead.
say to you, seek out those
Yeah.
live versions and compare and contrast for yourself.
Uh,
Um, yeah. Anyway,
okay.
sorry.
All right, but just a few of the very specific things about this that I love. Number one, I love the tone of Eitzel's voice as the song starts. It is yet another very subtle tone shift. it isn't the full whisper, the sweet whisper that I commented on, on previous albums a few times.
Mm-hmm.
This is a weak, exhausted vocal performance at the beginning, which is so appropriate for the song. And it is a subtle difference, but I do think it's a noticeable difference, and I think it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, he honestly sounds like he's like crying almost, like
Yeah.
as he's singing it. And given the heaviness of the topic, that's appropriate.
Yeah. But really just feels to me like a very, very genuine vocal performance. Then there's this, I'm going to use lick again, little bass lick. It's really a figure that happens in the chorus of this song. Danny plays a triplet figure over the 4/4 in the chorus, and it's like doom doom doom. It's I'm not going to be able to sing it. You're not going to be able to recognize it. But next time you listen to it, listen to this triplet that he plays over the 4. It's a scale. I believe it's a scale down. Not a
I
perfect
think I
scale,
know what
but
you're
like
talking about. It's when he
three
hits
descending notes.
nothing changes when he's singing that part. It's
Doom
like
doom.
boom, boom, boom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that. I think it's such a nice little musical moment in this song. I actually love the breakdown in the trumpet solo. It's just it just breaks down and gets very like sparse. And then finally, for someone who is really a critic of the fade out, I think the ending, what he chooses to do at the end of this song, is exactly the reason that I think bands, musicians should not by instinct head towards the fade out. He chooses to end this song, nothing changes, and then he goes, "Not ever." And he sings it, but he sings it weakly. And like all the music has stopped right before that. So he's just kind of a cappella for that last little phrase. And it's haunting. You know what I mean? It really, really is this very interesting, powerful way to end the song. I just think a lot of small but very meaningful choices in this one that, make it a classic or make it close to a classic.
I don't know why, but like this one doesn't like it's the something about the music that doesn't connect with me as much on this one. Like I fully appreciate the lyrics. I fully appreciate his vocal performance, but something, I don't know, like on an album that's pretty chock full of sort of smoky, jazzy sort of moods, this one I don't like as much for some reason. And I can't explain it.
Well, I've got to say, Jay William, that you're in the minority here. You're in the minority among Eitzel AMC fans, as far as I can tell, because this song, based on the bit of looking around that I've done, is not a permanent fixture in his set lists, but it shows up frequently.
Well, I will tell you, like I said, I watched those live videos, and that actually made me appreciate the song more. I'll be upfront. I like prior to kind of going through the album, because remember, I was not familiar with this album back when it was released. Like this is really kind of my first time, immersing myself in it. And initially I was like, this is my least favorite on the album, but then I listened a second and a third time and, and dug into the lyrics and all of that. I backtracked it. And so my appreciation for it has grown.
Yeah.
But then going and seeing those live performances, I think the song is great, but I preferred seeing him do it live versus the album version, I guess, is where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah, well, listen, we're all entitled to our opinions. Even you, J. William Hall, even you.
Well, we'll see for how much longer.
well, with that, though, maybe we should move on and see. We can give Wild Sea a try. Now, of course, not to be confused with Sting's song off of the album The Soul Cages, Wild Sea.
Oh, my. Who came first?
Well, you know what? I'm pretty confident Sting came first at this point.
So you're saying that Mark
no,
Eitzel
not saying-
ripped off Sting?
I'm saying that Eitzel
How dare you?
is such a strong songwriter with such a singular voice. He decided he didn't need to use wild twice in the name of his song. He could just call it Wild Sea.
Get to the point. More succinct.
Yeah,
Tighten it up,
yeah.
Sting. Tighten it up.
Yeah. Well, all right. So we're going to get into it. It is 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Let's give it a listen.
Welcome to the laws of decay, a song of Darwin and dismay.
J. William Hall, one of the more quotable Eitzel lines, in my opinion, in the entire discography. Welcome to the laws of decay, the song of Darwin and dismay.
All right.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that a great one?
Yeah. I mean, this song is kind of like an opus in a way. Like, there's a lot of lyrics to this song. It's just kind of like one run-on sentence, basically.
Yeah, but beautiful. I have to say, I think it's an absolute killer. It is, in my interpretation, simultaneously a really lovely expression of the sea, of nature, of kind of great forces. It kind of arrayed both with and against you as a person in life. That exists somehow kind of like over and outside of our everyday concerns, right? It really is a song, in my opinion, about how we and our kind of day-to-day comings and goings are meaningless ultimately in the face of everything else. And the sea here, I think, is the stand-in for everything else. And I have to say, it's a, like so many Eitzel songs, I think it's confounding because I think at many points throughout those lyrics that thing that he's expressing is quite beautiful, quite freeing, right? That sense that, all of our kind of daily bullshit just doesn't really mean anything to the sea as it kind of rises and ebbs and flows. And somehow that can be a freeing feeling. Then, you also, I think, have to acknowledge, or one might choose to acknowledge, and I am going to choose to acknowledge it here, the end of this song is undeniably kind of a seeming description of drowning, right? And being pulled down into kind of those depths. And I think, he kind of captures it when he says, what was it? It was, it wasn't invited, it was not unwelcome, something like that. I can't, it was invited, it was not unwelcome, right? It's this kind of like sense that like, the willingness to be drowned in this greater whole. I just think it's a very, very powerful, complex, interesting set of lyrics that are, if you happen, it's very apropos. I don't know if you happen to watch the show The White Lotus.
Oh,
J.
yes,
William
I do.
Hall.
Yes, I do.
Dude, now did you happen to last night as we're recording
No,
the finale?
don't. Yes, just
Okay.
Shish.
I'm
Don't
not-
go into it.
There will be no spoiler alerts, but I will say that there has been a theme this season that's been pretty consistent, right? And they've talked about this dynamic of like the greater forces, the ocean. There's some kind of quasi-Buddhist stuff around all this, and they kind of it's a little bit of a trope this season, and I have to say that listening to this song in light of watching that show, I mean, it really, there's in some ways some kind of similarity of thought there. Hopefully that's not an insult to Mr. Eitzel, but I certainly don't intend it as that. I think it's a great song. I'm going to stop. I'm going to let you say what you want to say?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, like I said, this one is like almost like a giant kind of run-on stream of consciousness. At least that's the feel of it. He's just kind of like singing his heart out over top of the music. And I read it the same as what I think you're saying, like just sort of a commentary on how we're but flotsam and jetsam in the sea of life, and wild things happen, and you can't control a lot of it, like you're just getting kind of pushed around. And the thing that I noticed, two things. One is that the name of the album is in the lyrics to this song. Yes. And the other is that the music kind of mirrors that idea. It sort of rises and falls and sort of sways this way and that, like throughout the course of the song, as does his vocal. Like, so it's almost as if, as a listener, you're floating in the water and being pushed around and stuff. Like, at least that was kind of how I heard it. Like when I really read the lyrics and was kind of like, like the song feels, it gets more dynamic and powerful at times, and then falls. So really writerly song, just a lot of lyrics.
Yeah, there are. Now, what about the music, though? Unlike it, really, the lyrics are really kind of the star of this show. This is a very simple arrangement. It's a very simple song. I think, really, it's just a 2-chord song. I could be wrong about that, but my recollection is just kind of a 2-chord song.
Well, I think it actually kind of holds on one chord for like a full 2.5 minutes. Like the first 2.5 minutes of the song, it's just kind of hanging on one chord. And then it does a kind of bridge section that has sort of a descending thing that sounds a little bit like Jesus's hands, like the bridge of Jesus's hands. That's what the bridge in this song reminded me of.
Yeah. But a simple song, this kind of goes back to Eitzel. It seems like Eitzel playing guitar, Caffin doing some really nice touches of pedal steel behind him, but very, very simple, intimate arrangement.
And it sounds like there's a mandolin or something, that's kind of one of the primary.
That's right.
Or maybe a dulcimer. I don't know. One of those, old-timey kind of sounding stringed instruments seems to be the main thing. Yeah.
Well, I have to say I think this is a the side B, in my opinion, starts off substantially stronger than side A.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, much, much stronger.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Big talk for you about side B versus side A.
I'm telling you, and wait until we get to the next song. But I think it's really it's a very strong first 3 songs on side B. Whereas I would maybe make the argument that the first 3 songs on side A are 3 of the weakest songs on the album.
Oof. Now we're talking controversy. Hot takes.
Yeah.
Well, I will say about this one that while I enjoy it and I like sort of it's sort of experimental in a way, just the way it kind of just like is like this one chord and he just kind of sings over top of it for most of the song. And and I like the instrumentation. I assume it's Danny playing the mando or whatever it is on this. I don't know. That's what I picture in my mind. But 4.5 minutes, like, there might be a tighter, like, okay.
All right.
I'm just saying that's a thought I had while listening.
Okay. All right. Well, the J. William Hall produced version of this album, they tighten it up. Maybe put a little drum machine back there as well,
Oh yeah, I love drum machines.
All right, so should we move on to track 3 on side B, Aspirin?
Yes.
Okay, 4 minutes and 44 seconds, J. William Hall. Why don't we just dive right in?
Real thing, my love. Though all you had was stolen, tell me will your heart always be broken?
Okay. I am going to turn this one lyrically over to you to lead the way. Go ahead.
So I read this as, it's interesting because it's almost like it seems like a role reversal type of situation in the lyrics, where usually Eitzel seems to be singing where he's kind of the one who's down. And in this one, it almost seems like, somebody he cares about, a lover or a friend or whatever, like that they are down, and he's trying to kind of console them and sort of speak reason to them, but at the same time, I had a thought of like, is he singing to himself? Like somebody with an eternal broken heart. And they're sort of incapable of returning love because their heart is kind of broken. And so it almost felt like, but he's sort of saying you. And so it seemed like he's trying to say to somebody like, why can't you return my love? Or, are you always going to be brokenhearted? Like,
I took it at face. I do think that it's an interesting idea that maybe he's actually kind of singing to himself, which obviously there's precedent for, right? Many times throughout the catalog. I think probably most notably Johnny Mathis Feat, where he clearly, very explicitly is taking on kind of a role of another character singing back to he, Mark Eitzel, which is kind of interesting. So we certainly couldn't rule that out, okay? But nor could we rule out that he's singing a song of true affection and concern for a friend about a breakup, which, of course, he's done before on Ex-Girlfriend.
Right.
So
he's played the role of consoler.
He has played the role of consoler. He's also played the role of someone talking to him. So it's difficult for us to say. What I will say here is these are, in my opinion, the most tightly crafted pop lyrics on this record. Pop lyrics.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I'm looking at the lyrics right now. I agree. I mean, it's got a really identifiable chorus, and
there's so many nice little things nice little touches that he does that are just so kind of slick, and make the song flow forward, kind of drive forward, carry you through the lyrics and the story really well. It's just structurally really great. I think the first of these lyrically that I want to point out is the repeated phrase that kind of takes you from the verse into the lyrics, right? Where he says, as the verse kind of ends, it always ends with my love, right? And then he says something different, though something broken. I hope you're like, and that's really but I love how he kind of continues the thought right into the chorus lyric. It just makes it kind of flow into that chorus, I think, really well. I love that. I also just think it's a really sweet song. It's just a sweet sentiment. It feels to me, and again, I took it a little bit more on face value than you, that he really is just kind of like taking his friend's side in a breakup. He's doing all the things a friend would do, right? The first one, he's kind of trying to get you out of the pain, out of the self-hatred. And he's saying it's a cheap thing. Why such a cheap thing always hides the real thing, my love. I love that. And then the second one, the literal hero who threw away your life, feeling hate and being proven right, always looks into like I love this verse overall, but I love how interesting it is the way in which he's describing someone who's basically really into themselves, right? Like, it is such a rich way to sing "You're so vain," basically. You know what I mean? The little hero who threw away your life, feeling hate, being proven right, always looks into the mirror trying to see bullets instead of eyes, sees a handsome devil who's the spirit of the skies. Like, I mean, that is like, wow, what a rich way of saying this person is a fucker who's like totally egotistical, thinks they're God. You know what I mean? Like relax. I love it. I can't say enough about how much I love these lyrics.
I noted that he has in the third verse, I think he talks about broken glass. And so I was like, I don't think this is a direct callback to the song Broken Glass from the Restless Stranger album, but I just thought it was interesting that like that's the image, like how many are there other songs where like broken glass serves as a metaphor or whatever for something?
Yeah, it's true. I don't know. I think that this song is kind of let's move into the music.
Yeah.
I am going to just go ahead with it. I like this music nearly as much as I like the lyrics. I love the instrumentation of this song. I love that Mando, and goddamn if Bruce Caffin on the pedal steel isn't perfect on this song. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, this one definitely has the most country-ish kind of feel, but it's like a jaunty, bittersweet country pop kind of thing. Like the Mando definitely, is at the forefront, and the pedal steel's great. The drums,
okay.
I feel like
you're not a fan of Simone White.
No. Because listen, I told you, I went and I found his other band, Afro Mystic, and I was like, ooh, I like this. Like, I feel like he did not record this with the band. Like that maybe
really?
It was like, I feel like my theory is that, Eitzel hired him and was like, here's how the song goes, and I kind of needed to be about this tempo, and he just laid down essentially a click track, and then they laid the instruments over it, because I feel like his drums don't change like throughout. Like they're not reacting to the song,
I've never heard of that technique being done, though. I mean, maybe has that ever been done? Where somebody just comes in and has a drummer record like without playing with it. I've heard of like the band will come in and play, or some part of the band will play. You record the drums first, and then everything gets overdubbed on top of the drums. But the drums are playing along with the band in the first case.
Yeah,
but it sounds like what you're saying is, he really just was in a room, and Eitzel was like, all right, it's this tempo, and I want you to keep on going until I tell you to stop. Is that basically it?
Maybe that's an extreme interpretation, but or at least like it was just like Eitzel with the guitar, and like, because my assumption, just based on what we have read or pieced together about the coming together of this album, is that, he was hiring these guys as session guys. And so I'm sure it was like, they're available on this date between these hours, and we got to get them in, we got to get them to, boom, 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 lay these things down. And maybe at that point, Eitzel, he knew this, he could show him the songs, just him playing on guitar, but like, I don't know, because I just feel like, if he knew, if whoever the drummer was knew the songs better, there would be more dynamics, or more like doing a fill into a cymbal here, or you know what I mean? Like when we change sections, and it almost feels like he's just like playing the same beat throughout, like with no major changes. And and I feel like it's like just a touch like slow or something. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I want the song to like be almost even a little peppier, but you know, these are nitpicks. Like, I mean, obviously,
Okay.
like, but yeah, you know, I mean, it's a really nice song, and that's the only element that I was like, something doesn't feel right to me about this. But hey,
All right. Well, you know, we can. I will say I don't love. I'm going to be honest. I don't love the drums. I don't think on any American Music Club or Eitzel album across the board. As a drummer, I'm going to go one step further than you, Jay William. I'm going to say,
I thought I was being harsh.
no, I'm going to say the drumming has always been a weak point of the band for me. But I also, you know, I'm a drummer. I'm probably I pay more attention to that than a normal person might. And I also, and it's not like I'm looking for showy drums like Rush all the time. I think that mostly doesn't work in music. And I think usually when it's a really singer-songwriter driven kind of a band, it's really important that everyone kind of gets out of the way of the song. So I'm not going to say that, you know, I'm not going to sit here and kind of defend it voraciously, but I love the pace. I love the groove of this song. I think it's a little slow, but it has a real groove. You know what I mean? It has a groove that not many American Music Club songs have. And I attribute that to this drummer. I mean, you know, there's just a little, it isn't a metronomic four.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You know,
there's a pocket. There's actually a pocket here.
It is a pocket, but it is sort of metronomic too. Like it feels like it's very steady. There's not a lot of like he goes to the ride cymbal here. He does the fancy fill here. Like, you know, and not that I demand that of the drums either. And clearly that is the feel that Eitzel was going for on this album, because so many of the songs on this album have that kind of groove pocket kind of, you know, this drummer came from a hip hop band, you know, and so that's clearly what Eitzel wanted, and that's what a lot of these songs, that's the feel of them, you know. But for me, I guess maybe just I don't like that as much. Like I want to hear the drums rising and falling with the song in a way, you know, and that was the contrast. Like when I found those YouTube videos of him doing Mission Rock live, you know, whereas on the album there's kind of a slow, steady beat on that one as well. And it feels like it just kind of, it's almost like they recorded a measure of it and looped it, you know? And
well, you know
that's
what?
I object to.
Maybe Simone White needs to come on the podcast and defend his playing to you. We need to have a special episode. J. William Hall v. Simone White. Two men enter, one man leaves. Kind of,
you know, if he gets angry at me and he's coming at me, I'm going to be like, look, I love Afro Mystic.
All right. So the last thing that I'm going to say about this song before we move on is, so this song really struck me as one of the few songs on here that I can easily hear AMC doing.
Yeah, I could hear that. Yeah.
Okay.
It almost has like a Firefly kind of vibe to it.
Huh. I didn't think of that. But yeah, I guess I can see that. I'll have to ruminate on that one a little bit. But why don't I ruminate on that one after we get through the next song? Some bartenders have the gift of pardon. This is 5 minutes and 18 seconds. Let's go.
Specks almost drowned off the coast of California and started this museum to help the shipwreck remember.
Okay, another song about a bar. Second song on this side of the album that's written about an actual, well, I shouldn't say it's written about the bar Specs in San Francisco, but he mentions the name of Specs I think twice in these lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
So I will also say I've been to Specs many, many years ago. At this point, I'm going back to the late 90s. Was the last time I think I was in Specs. Who knows whether that place still exists?
I can tell you.
I can't.
It does exist because I did some research. I decided I dove into this one and read all about Specs and the bar and the history of the bar and because basically this song is sort of like, I mean, it's not just about that bar, but he sort of paints the picture like this is where this song is set. It's at this bar and he's talking about at least one bartender at that bar, and and it sounds like a cool place. What do they have, like display cases that have like oddities that people have brought to it was so the last time I was I think that this is the last time I was at Specs. I've only been there a couple, 2-3 times probably. But the first time I went, I don't know if you remember J. William Hall, but we were working together a very long time ago. This is the mid to late 90s, right? Last century.
We were employed by the same company. And at a certain point in my employ at that company, I relocated temporarily to San Francisco to work on a game that was being built out there.
Yes.
Basically for us, right? And so I lived in a corporate apartment in San Francisco for 5 or 6 months or something. Right? And this was in maybe 1998 or 1999 ish, somewhere around there. And one of the first things that so I'm there. I don't know anybody. I know one or two people in San Francisco at this point. But I'm 23, young, just alive, ready to tackle the world. And
Full
one of the
of
first things
spunk.
one of the things I tackled first was I walked from my corporate apartment, which was in Japantown, which is kind of right in the middle of San Francisco, to Specs, which I believe, if you just looked it up, you remember. I remember it being out kind of towards like North Beach or something, but that could be totally wrong. But I walked from my apartment to that bar, because
why?
Why? Well, because I knew it from the song.
Oh,
and
okay.
I had nothing to do. You know what I mean? I had nothing to do. I didn't know anybody in San Francisco. It was like a Friday night, and I knew this song, and I was like, why don't I go and try and find Specs? And so I went and found it, and probably had a couple of beers and walked home. That was
so. Did you notice while you were there, they have these display cases that have all of these like weird artifacts and stuff that I think the article
I honestly
read,
don't.
It was like sailors brought them, like because this bar, it has a really interesting history. It was founded, I think, in the early 1900s, and it was like this haven for like the sailors because it's near some kind of docks or something, and it became a center of like leftist union politics, like. And all the bartenders who work there are part of a union, like that's been established like from way back. And so the sailors would bring weird stuff that they've collected like on their journeys around the world. And so they have these display cases that have all this weird stuff in it that just like random sailors or whoever brought in and they decided to put in the case. That's what I saw.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I really don't remember that. It was
because they call it.
Yeah, it was.
They say it's a museum. I mean, it's not just a bar; it's a museum.
Now listen. Again, this is 30 years ago ish for me. So more than half of my life ago, more than half of my life ago. So a while ago. I remember going in there. It was, I had walked a long way to get there and I was like, tired. And I remember maybe I'm nuts, but I remember it being a fairly small bar, and I just kind of sat at the end of the bar by myself, got a couple of beers, and then left again. I don't remember really more than that. I don't remember there being anything really remarkable about the bar when I was there. I certainly, I'm sure on some level I harbored this idea that I was going to walk in and there was going to be Mark Eitzel sitting at the bar, waiting for me to pull up a stool, and that definitely didn't happen. So yeah, I feel like I don't really have a story here except to say that I don't remember it very well, but I have.
Well, I think it's a story that you like. That's where you chose to walk to, like when you first arrived in San Francisco, because of this song.
Yeah, because of this song. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, but again, lots more water, lots more drowning in this one, right? Really in keeping with the theme of these lyrics. But I just kind of read this as a very nice ode to a bartender and a bar. Pretty simple song. But the music for me, I don't love. And I am not, I don't dislike it, but I just kind of feel like this song, because of the weird scaling thing after each verse with the trumpet, gives the song an almost a weird jazz spoken word poetry feel to it. You remember that kind of thing? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
Poetry slams. Oh yeah.
Yeah, like a poetry slam kind of a feel more than a song. Do you think that's fair?
I do think it's fair. I mean, it definitely feels like we talked about like the coffee house vibe, sometimes of certain AMC songs. And this one, because there's no drums, it's like he's like banging on a tabla, or I don't know what it is. But, and again, I'm like, was this just like a click that they laid down basically and then overdubbed over top of it? Because it doesn't really change throughout, and no, I get that. I will say that, like, it probably was not one of my favorites either on first listen. The refrain, the title of the song, it's kind of a mouthful, like, and it conceptually is a lot to kind of think about in one line.
Yeah.
And so I was a little like, but then like when I read the lyrics and I read the articles about specs and the whole history and everything, and I came to appreciate the song so much more, and so like now I rate this in my top half favorites of the album, I would say, just based on the knowledge of what it's all about. But I mean, you're right, a lot. It's almost like he's singing about the bar and this bartender there, and the job of a bartender who has to talk and listen to all these different people and all from all different walks and different problems and stuff. And the bartender's job is to be sort of that sponge, that takes all of that in and doesn't, overreact or, judge, I guess, doesn't judge, these people. And, but he also talks about the bar as if it's like an island that all of these people are shipwrecked on. And I thought that was a really good metaphor.
Yeah, it is. I think there's a lot of merit in these lyrics. I don't feel like there's enough of a, I definitely have a bias towards Eitzel's more traditionally crafted songwriting, like more poppy songwriting. I that's probably pretty apparent to anybody listening to this kind of across the albums. I generally migrate towards those songs, a song like Wild Sea notwithstanding. And I just think for me what I don't like about this is it's very much a non-traditionally kind of crafted pop song. It's a little bit more of a,
it's more of a vibe piece. Yeah.
It is.
It does feel like a beat poet, like late night at the bar with the spotlight and the cigarette, given their message. And, but I guess just like after researching the lyrics, I'm kind of like, oh, I think that's cool. I just think it's a cool, cool song, cool thing to write about.
It is a cool song and a cool thing to write about. But are you ready to to move on to a different location, we are going to take a very fast plane, train, or just teleport
not
in
an
our
automobile.
mind.
Yeah.
No. It's going to be tough. Can't drive there from where we're going to go from Specs right there in beautiful San Francisco, California, all the way across the world, 8,000 miles, maybe more, to
Who knows? Nobody knows.
Southend-on-Sea.
Yes.
Southend-on-Sea. Now,
England, jolly England.
Yeah, one of your old haunts. So why don't we just go ahead and listen and see if it conjures up any memories for you.
You said to me, I'm beginning to think that you're part of the enemy. You said to me, if I was drowning, would you save me from Southend-on-Sea?
There it is. Southend-on-Sea. Talk about a pop song, but go ahead. Jay William, lay it on me. What do you think?
Well, it seems to tell the tale. This is sort of also like a story song.
Yep.
It's clearly set in this specific location, which is Southend-on-Sea, which is in England at the mouth of the Thames River, just down river from London. And I guess it's sort of a touristy kind of place. On the ocean, and people come there from other parts of England. And it sounds like Eitzel is there with a very unpleasant sounding person who is kind of mean, and and he's sort of just given the play-by-play of like they're walking through Southend and seeing different stuff, and also having this conversation that seems to be mostly kind of like pecking at each other,
Yeah. See, I would agree. There is definitely massive tension here. The counterparty in this song, if it's a real person, really does seem like a pretty unpleasant person, and is pretty cruel to Eitzel within the course of these lyrics. But this is really a song that I think is a bookend to Sacred Heart. And remember in the last episode, I talked a little bit about how very loosely I feel like this album kind of tracks the trajectory of a relationship from the beginning of a relationship to the end of a relationship. Obviously, there are certain songs that aren't that, right? So this is not, I'm not about to claim that this is the next The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway here, okay? This is not that. But I do feel like the sequencing of the songs and the telling of the tale of these relationships seems to me to be that on side A, you kind of have Sacred Heart, which I interpreted as the beginning of a relationship. You had some issues with that. Then Saved clearly is as much of a I am in love, this is love, kind of a love song as you get. Then you get When My Plane Finally Goes Down. This is like very much, I think also still a love song. And
Doomed.
then, now we're in Southend-on-Sea. You hear a very kind of literal description of what seems like a very tense vacation with perhaps a partner, a romantic partner. And it's leading up to the dissolution of that relationship, which I believe is captured very painfully and beautifully in the next song. So I'll save that for then. But that was my read of this one.
That is entirely valid. Like I say, I'm a little newer to this album than you are, so maybe I'm not seeing the overarching themes of it yet. But that makes sense when you explained it out that way. And this definitely seems like whoever he's with in this song, it doesn't seem like they're getting along, It reminds me a little bit of, maybe this is more musically because in spite of those kind of, darker sort of lyrics, the music is very upbeat. you know,
Super
and it's got
upbeat,
this
right?
jaunty, like upbeat kind of feel to it. And the chorus actually, like when they kick into the chorus, it reminds
Yeah.
me of like the lift of like, "Can you help me?" You know, it has that kind of lift to it. And,
Yeah.
you know, so there's definitely kind of a stark contrast between lyrics and music on this one.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to dive fully into that that music, it is an undeniably groovy song. I mean, this is really the song where I think you kind of do it again, in kind of in defense of Simone White. There is an undeniable groove and pocket to this song as well that I just don't think you ever got on any of the AMC albums.
No,
Right?
no,
It
yeah,
it
definitely, yeah, yeah.
it has that.
It's got a hip hop pop
It's a
feel to it. And I mean, and Eitzel, you know, during the verses, it's almost like he's not, it's less melodic and more rhythmic, his
Yeah.
vocal part. You know, he's almost like staying on one note for a lot of the verses, but it's almost like, you know, it's not rap, but like, it's sort of
Yeah.
like leaning that direction more.
I just think that in the chorus of this one in particular, it really is kind of Eitzel in a mode that you don't really hear very often, where he's like, you can feel him kind of in that pocket vocally as well, which I just think is really interesting. That's not really something that you hear in a lot of other songs, right? I think, but in this one, you can almost imagine him dancing a little bit as he's singing it. I mean, he really is kind of rhythmically in the pocket with the rest of the band. I also think there's a really fun little background vocal section in the second chorus of this song that I liked. So I think it's a like well-crafted, groovy, very light. It feels very kind of you know, adult contemporary. You know, that's kind of the way I think about the. I don't know if that's the right term, but it is definitely more of an album that's oriented towards, you know, people probably Eitzel's age at this point, which is logical. But it has a
Grown-ups.
little bit, yeah, more grown up feel. This is not my favorite song on the album, but I appreciate. I don't. I wouldn't say that because I feel like there are specific flaws or things that I take issue with. I actually think it's like really well put together, really well executed. It really feels like it's a very good version of kind of what it was intended to be. That's just not my kind of thing, though, is kind of where I land. On
Yeah,
this song.
I mean, I tend to agree. Like, you know, I mean, especially at the time that this was released, and you know, we were in our 20s, and you know, I heard something like this back then, and I wasn't open to it. You know, frankly, like, you know, it didn't rock.
Yeah.
You know, like, and or
Yeah.
it didn't have like, you know, when we talk about slowcore, I was thinking like Codeine and Idaho
Yeah.
slowcore, not like adult contemporary, softer or whatever. And
Yeah.
the trumpet in this one, like obviously we've talked about Mark Isham. He's this champion studio trumpet guy, you know, came in, laid down trumpets on a number of songs on this album, but his sound puts it right in that adult contemporary Windham Hill sort of vibe. And,
Yeah.
you know, as tight and solid as it is. And this is one of the few songs on the album that they have this like sort of tight flourish of a finish, and everybody finishes like dun 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 dun, you know, and it's got this like super like, and I noted that because, you know, unlike other songs on the album where it feels a little like, does everybody really know the song like fully, like, or
Yeah.
you know, and this one it feels like was more rehearsed, and you know, so I wonder if this was maybe one of the first ones, because I think there's even like multi-tracked trumpets, like it's like it sounds like a trumpet
Yeah.
section, you know, instead of just one guy. So
Yeah.
you know, I just think that that's interesting. I wonder if this was sort of, maybe they were thinking this is going to be the single or something.
Honestly, I'm not too sure. I don't think there ever was a single in here. But I think there might have been a single planned. This is information I got from, let's just say, a friend of a friend. And
That's mysterious.
it is mysterious. It does.
So there was a
there were
single
some,
planned?
Okay, so there were B-sides recorded, a song called Something Else and another one called Slow Burn. I have not heard either of those, which were intended for a single EP that never came out, and Southend-on-Sea was going to be the single on that, right? So it'd be a
Okay.
Southend-on-Sea single with a couple of B-sides on it.
Okay, so you can hear like that they put a little bit more into this one to get like the arrangements and everything like tight.
Yeah, I've got to say, I do question the choice of this song as a single against all of the other songs on the record. But in the end, it sounds like they didn't release the single in any event, so it doesn't really matter. All academic at this point, young man.
Yes.
So, Jay Williams, should we move on to the final track on side B, Everything is Beautiful?
Okay.
Okay, why don't we do it? Everything is Beautiful, 5 minutes, 13 seconds. Let's go.
And everything's beautiful. But babe, not you or me.
Very weird imagery in this one, right? Very imagistic, but an undeniable sense of kind of doom. This is a doom song, and I took this song as the end of the relationship that a number of the other songs on this album, in my mind, also described. So this is the end of that arc.
So the thing that the title of this song reminds me of is, do you remember the old like gospel, everything is beautiful in its own way? It was this like,
I don't.
I think it was like a hit song, but it's from 1970. It was this like sort of gospel pop song that became a hit by this guy called Ray Stevens. And I have to assume that Eitzel was referring to that song, because that's a pretty famous song. Like, at least, I'm sure when Eitzel was a kid, like that song was on the radio and stuff. And so, he's sort of quoting that first part, because in the original song is everything is beautiful in its own way, but it's all about like God created, everything, and therefore everything is beautiful. I think that's the basic message of that song. And Eitzel is saying, he's quoting that song, everything is beautiful, but not you or me. Like, and I have to wonder if, this is a song about being in a relationship with another man, and, and just how society looks upon that, or like the homophobia of society kind of looks upon that. Like that was kind of the read I was getting here. And maybe it is a breakup, but there's extreme like self-loathing, conveyed through these lyrics, and extreme sadness. Like this is a bleak, kind of song.
Yeah, I read through these lyrics a lot, really trying to piece together some specific thing I could pull out of it. I couldn't get there. I definitely got moments of this kind of like dread, this moments of sadness, this sense that it is a relationship it's somehow about a relationship between these two people, but it's so kind of like opaque in my mind. It's evocative, right? It's evocative of a mood, but I had a difficult time kind of interpreting it literally. But what about the music? I think that the production on this album, or on this song, is awesome. I love how they put this song together. It is so sparse. The verses really, really, not much going on here other than the upright bass and the vocals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah,
they get to that.
the upright bass. I wonder, like, is it Danny playing it?
Yeah, it's Danny playing it.
Because it's got a really cool, like that climbing. It's
Yep.
like the bass kind of keeps,
boom, boom.
yeah.
Yep.
And that's sort of
It's-
the punctuation to like each sort of line in the song, and I think it's pretty effective.
Yeah, it's great. I honestly, I love Danny's work on this album across the board. So many nice little like touches here and there.
Well, and it's
that
very
I think
different than
bring a lot
AMC. Yeah, like
Totally.
the bass, because he's playing like a fretless bass, upright bass, like he's doing a different actual bass on this album versus AMC stuff which is more, rock oriented bass. Although he did get a little funky on those last couple of AMC albums, but this one is more in the jazz, sort of wheelhouse.
Yeah, yeah. But then you get to the kind of like, there's like a more or less a chorus section of this song, and you get this piano, which is very eerie. I think it has a chorus effect on it. I'm not sure if it's chorus, but it has it's very processed piano. Sounds very weird. Then there is an even more processed, weird sounding pedal. I think it's a pedal steel in that same section. And then they have just kind of like like sound effects and stuff happening, like samples. And so this really feels to me like, they started goofing around with this kind of approach on, San Francisco, but they're doing a lot more of it here, which I think is interesting within the context of what is largely kind of an acoustic jazz trio type instrumentation approach on the album. But this song for me, I think represents a direction that is very interesting that Eitzel or the band could have taken, right? A much more kind of weirdly ambient, electronic almost, again,
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up Yankee Hotel Foxtrot because I think that's a roughly contemporaneous example of a band that took kind of a weird turn in a different direction. But, Radiohead around this same time was kind of starting to get into this type of stuff. And I don't know, I really like it on this song. I just think it sounds very cool.
I would describe it as a little bit like post rock, like it is almost getting into like, there was a band called Bark Psychosis. Do you remember that band at all?
I remember the name, but I never really heard the band, I don't think.
Great band. And they
Really?
were very much, they were sort of disciples of like the last couple of Talk albums, which,
Okay.
I could go on about, but they did a lot of these like extended ambient-ish, like sound effects kind of just floating in the background a little bit. Like it sounds like you're in a room or something somewhere, and so that is, this is kind of like a production touch, and Eitzel is the producer on this album. So, there's quite a variety of different styles and production touches throughout the album. And I would say that, this song is unique on the album in that way.
Yeah. And now I gotta call it out. There is a fade out in this song. Kind of. It's more or less a fade out, but I like it. I think it's executed in an interesting way. It sounds like the song just kind of gives up or gives out. You know what I mean? And it works, I think, well within the context of this song specifically. So my, normal automatic indictment of a fade out, I don't think applies here. This is a fade out executed in kind of a cool way, in my opinion.
I feel like there have been in this season, you made much ado of your hate of the fade out, but then every time that we've encountered one, it seems like you've been like, I like this one though.
Yeah, no, I because I hate hammering on it every time I hear it. There's actually, I'm trying to think of it. There's at least one song on this album that when I was doing my re-listen, I noted, and I was like, oh, this is exactly the kind of fade out I don't like. I can't think of it right now. Actually, the opener, There's No Easy Way Down, they fade that out in I think a very boring way. So there are examples of it. But I will say that I think generally speaking, American Music Club, Mark Eitzel versus Rush, I think Rush was guilty of bad fade outs a lot, actually, across the catalog.
Cop-out fade out.
Yeah, the cop-out fade-out. And I think it was a function of how they approached songwriting. I mean, this is my theory. No, very little evidence to back this up. But Rush is kind of well-known, I think, among Rush fans as a totally collaborative songwriting process where Alex and Geddy, the bass player and guitarist, would kind of jam out interesting musical parts. The drummer would go off and write sets of lyrics, give them to Alex and Geddy, and they'd piece together a song based on these cool musical like riff sections that they had, and then they'd somehow stitch it all together, right? And clearly they've come up with some amazing songs. They're a legendary band, blah, 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 blah. But I do think that that's a little bit different than a singular vision from a singer-songwriter kind of calling the shots, who I think probably has a better sense of the beginning and the end of a song. This is my theory. Not too many people in the world out there, I would imagine, coming up with theories of songwriting of Rush versus American Music Club, but I'm
maybe
in
that one
group.
dude in Boston who wrote.
That's right.
He's thinking about this.
He is. He's while he's on the bench adjudicating cases. He is thinking about this. All right. So now we are at the end. Are you prepared to move on to the end?
I think so.
Okay.
The one thing that I that I should have brought at the beginning of last episode, because I found this interview with Eitzel that was in the CMJ New Music magazine in 1996. And he had some extended quotes about, I think the interviewer was asking him about like, oh, do you feel more pressure because you know this is now just your name instead of American Music Club? And he says, and I quote, "I feel a lot less pressure because I don't have to be financially responsible for 2 managers, 2 lawyers, and 5 band members. I didn't put my foot down on a lot of things as a member of a band, and when I did, it would be, okay, Mark's being difficult, let's have a cooling off period." And he kind of goes on to say, like, you know, he wanted to put more piano instead of guitar, and he says, I don't have to play in time. I don't have to make sure every song gets arranged for 5 people. I don't have to worry that the band won't like the songs. You know, and he kind of goes on and basically, you know, I mean, it's brutally honest interview, like, you know, because these are not, you know, these are more like matter of fact, you know, sort of quotes that he's giving this article about the financial difficulties of being an American Music Club. And, you know, so I just want to say that provided a lot of context for me for like viewing this album. Like this was his opportunity to kind of call all the shots, you know, not just as the songwriter, but as the producer. And so presumably like he made the album that he wanted to make at that moment.
I know, but you know what I think is it, and I totally appreciate and understand how he must have felt. I mean, as much as I can, but I do appreciate all of that, right? And that seems logical, and I get it. Like, good for him that he decided to go out and do it. I think it's interesting, though, that so quickly after leaving American Music Club, he then hooks up with Peter Buck, who at that time is like, you know, one of the primary songwriters of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, rock band in the world at that moment in time, right? Mm-hmm. Where, and they talk a little bit about it in the Sean Body book, but where, you know, probably a lot of the same, you know, a lot of the pressure that he left behind by leaving American Music Club, the expectations, by, you know, that I think a lot of people had when a new American Music Club album came out, were reintroduced, but now in a different way, because now this is a Peter Buck project, right? And he's also in a studio co-writing songs with someone who has, in a lot of ways, even more gravitas than any of the members of American Music Club, simply because he's Peter Buck from REM at that moment in time. Now, the dynamic that the book describes actually is quite, harmonious, I think, but it does strike me as a little kind of funny, right? Because within a year or so, he's in the studio with Peter Buck doing West.
Yeah, it's like one left turn after another, sort of.
Yeah.
Coming off of American Music Club, and I think that I can totally understand how like he was ready to just try different things, and you see that on this album. I mean, just the sound of the album, the jazz leaning as opposed to the rock leaning, or whatever, however you would describe American Music Club. I think it's interesting though that like Caffin and Danny sort of like came into the fold to do this album with him, and so it does feel like it's the Voodie Mooney kind of rock element of American Music Club that was just subtracted, and then you've got sort of a more jazz forward kind of feel put in its place. But even so, that it's a pretty diverse range of songs. It's like he hits upon a lot of like topics and styles that you would expect from him, but it's very broad. Like on one album you have these upbeat pop inflected kind of jams, and then you have these really super heavy sad pieces. So it's like I kind of understand why maybe it was tough for like a pop audience to embrace Mark Eitzel's solo album.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of the breadth of these songs, it's now your time, J. William Hall. This is the moment. The fans, they just tune in. They're like, I cannot wait to see what J. William Hall is going to do when it comes to the best and the worst. So it's your time. I need for you to select the worst song on 60 Watt Silver Lining. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm going to be up front. Like, I'm not confident in either of these picks. I had I've probably listened through the album preparing for this episode like 4 or 5 times over the course of a couple of weeks. And I have gone 180 degrees on almost every song on the album. Like,
really?
Really? Almost every song on the album, there have been moments or what I'm listening to, I'm like, oh, like this might be one of my favorites, and then later I'm like, I think that might, because now, of course, I feel all this pressure to pick my favorite and least favorite song. So this might be a shock to you. This might be a shock to the listeners, but as my least favorite song on 60 Watt Silver Lining, I'm going with the final song, Everything is Beautiful.
Wow. What shocking choice. That is a shocking choice.
I know.
Is also,
I'm not saying I feel confident about it, but
no, I mean, you shouldn't feel confident about it, to be honest with you, because it's wrong. You whiffed big. You whiffed bigly.
I expected you to say that.
Yeah, you whiffed bigly. That was a swing and a miss, as they say. Take a seat, Mr. Hall. You're going to have to wait through the rotation and then get it back up to the plate. I'm using a baseball metaphor here. If you guys aren't following along, I'm talking baseball. Here we are.
Yeah, San Francisco Giants, the stadium up the road from Mission Rock. Yeah, right. Got it.
No, that is absolutely not the worst song on the album. I will tell you, the worst song on the album is, without a doubt, Always Turn Away. Yeah, it's Always Turn Away. It is Always Turn Away for a number of reasons that I've always identified. I think it is safe for us to always turn away from Always Turn Away. But now, you have a chance to redeem yourself. You're gonna tap the bat on the home plate there. You're gonna step out of the batter's box. You're gonna take a few cuts. You're gonna loosen up, right?
Right.
You're gonna focus in.
I'm warming up in the on deck circle. I've got the donut on the bat, and I'm swinging it back and forth to
That's right.
get ready to hit a home run.
You're spitting on your hands.
But I've got a sadness to me as I step up to the plate, because I know that my attempt here is doomed. That has been predetermined. Because my favorite song, the song that has stuck with me the most after 5 listens through the album, the one that I'm still kind of humming in my head, is Always Turn Away. Track 3. You're not going to believe this.
Oh my God. Now this may have been the first song in the first time in the history of backtracking that this has occurred. We have had, over our episodes, over the season 1 episodes, many instances of disagreement on the best and the worst songs. I don't think ever have we had a worst song be the other person's best song. This is an historic day.
I think this speaks to some extent to maybe the reaction of American Music Club fans to this album. Because this album is quite, it's quite broad in its scope, but very little of it fits into the American Music Club sound and feel, which I think is by design. Eitzel wanted to go do this different thing. And so I think that if you're coming from I love American Music Club and you listen to this album, there are certain elements that appeal to you that, I don't know. It's just I think different people have different aspects of this album that they like. And for some reason, that song, there's something about it that has become a little earwormy for me. And, and so I like it.
Yeah. Well,
so soon
there is no accounting for taste. Now, I will share with you that I had a real struggle with this one. There were three songs that I had kind of nominated within my brain to be the best song on here, and I really had to dig in. I had to listen to each of them many, many times to make my decision. I'm going to tell you which 3 songs those were.
Okay.
It was Wild Sea.
Mm-hmm.
It was Aspirin, and it was Everything is Beautiful. And ultimately, I decided that the best song on this album is Aspirin. It's got to be Aspirin. It is a perfectly crafted, just gem of a song, beautiful lyrics, beautiful sentiment. Just it's great. It's a great song. It is a well executed song, in my opinion. So there you go.
All right. I'm not going to argue with you on that one. There's also some footage of Eitzel performing that song out there on YouTube as well. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have a song on this album that I'm like, oh, I don't like that one at all. Like as with most American Music Club albums, I'm like, every song in this album, there's something about it that I like. I think the overall mood or whatever, I would still say it's probably not exactly my cup of tea versus some of the AMC stuff, but I've come to appreciate the album much, much, much more upon backtracking.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. I have always liked this album, as I said up front. I still like this album. It is not I don't think it's a flawless album, but I think it's got some beautiful songs on it. I like the approach that they took. I think it feels like the recording of this album was a lot easier and more fun than the recording of the last few American Music Club albums. It just has this feel. It feels much more improvisational. It doesn't feel like every track had endless takes. I think the points that you made about the drumming are all pretty accurate. It does feel like he probably only played through these songs once or twice and maybe just didn't know all the changes, and so he wasn't doing big, 2-bar Neil Peart fills going into the chorus. But
right.
But but I think it works. I don't know. I just think it's a light album, relatively speaking, in many places, but I like it. So
it's a very unique amalgam of sounds. Like, I mean, because of that, more hip hop-ish pop drumming combined with the jazzy element, that's and Eitzel's voice, of course. And you know, he's still, these songs, you don't, like, nobody else writes songs like this, and so that combination, it's a unique combination. Like, I don't think it's going to light the charts on fire, but, I can't think of other examples that are like, oh, this kind of sounds like, actually the closest one that popped into my mind, I think maybe on Wild Sea, was Van Morrison. Like,
oh, really?
At least that song specifically feels a little bit Van Morrison-esque, like, one of his, ruminations that, kind of, he's doing vocal stuff over, and it feels a little bit in that direction and a little jazz tinged or whatever. But, I mean, hats off. Hey, good album.
Yeah.
I'm solid solo studio debut.
It is. Now, we are going to, next week, what are we going to dive into? There was some controversy last week. We could not remember what solo album comes next here, but I have confirmed it is West. So it is the well-known, well-publicized Peter Buck, Mark Eitzel collaboration. We are going to dive into that one next week. Are you ready, Jay William?
I am, and again, I will say, like, I listened to this album a couple times back in the day, but it never sunk into my deep subconscious. So, like, this will be sort of like listening to this a little bit for the first time again. And I will say, like, back in the day when it was announced that Eitzel and Peter Buck were doing an album together, I was like, holy fucking shit, like, this is huge. Expectations went way up.
Yeah, way up. I mean, they really were. The expectations were high. Well, we're gonna see if it lives up to those expectations in retrospect after a deep backtracking. But before that, you're just gonna have a week. You're gonna have a week where you need to go onto the computer, go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts, write a review. My recommendation, 5 stars. Why? Because it's a great podcast. Say, I love this podcast. It is the best American Music Club podcast that has ever been produced, which is objectively true, people. So go ahead and do it. It helps us get discovered, and therefore helps American Music Club and Mark Eitzel get discovered.
I know a lot of... I just wanted to say, I know a lot of young people are going to be listening to this podcast on the beach. At spring break, probably blasting it from their boom boxes on Daytona, at Fort Lauderdale, at Panama City. Yeah. Okay.
They're gonna be drinking those alcoholic like a White Claw. God forbid they're hanging off the goddamn balcony at Panama City Beach in their rented condo on floor 13. I think
60 Watt Silver Lining is the perfect spring break beach album. Everything is beautiful.
It is.
Is going to bring the party to a close.
It is. That is the sentiment that every 17-year-old who's semi-naked and covered with sand and drunk as a monkey wants, right?
We're talking girls gone wild. We're talking guys gone wild. Everyone's going wild. 60 Watt Silver Lining.
That is absolutely right. That is a good recommendation. You know what else you can do? You can go out there. You can send us a message. Follow us on Instagram first, because you just have to go to Backtracking Rocks ROX, and then there we are. You just hit follow. Do that. Then send us a direct message. Ask us about something. Tell us about something. After you're done with that, go to Reddit. It's reddit.com if you haven't been there before. Go to reddit.com. Go to the American Music Club subreddit and join it. You can find us in there. We're out. Go to X. Just put it on your phone. Go to X. Follow at Backtracking Rocks. and you're gonna get little messages on X that tell you about, you know, American Music Club when we have episodes releasing. So just do that. Or just send us a fucking email at backtrackingrocksrox@gmail.com. Just, we're gonna get that. That's what we prefer. We'll engage you in a civilized conversation.
Yeah.
There will be so if you're young, I'm gonna warn you, trigger warning. There will be punctuation in the fucking email, okay?
And capital letters at the beginning of the sentence.
There's gonna be a salutation. It's gonna be dear sir, dear ma'am, whatever,
Right.
Hi Jane, whatever. Colon.
Yes.
Return. Then
And-
complete sentences.
We might write it in cursive.
I mean, I that you're gonna have to do that because I don't know. I don't know that I could write cursive anymore. But all right. So there it is. That's it for the week. Thank you all for listening. Jay William, as always, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dan.
Okay, we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.